couple of quick announcements before we jump into the Word. One, just a reminder that if you feel like the Lord's calling you to give, Venmo, you know where it's at, man. That's awesome. Venmo is up. Venmo's up there. If you feel like the Lord's calling you to give. And don't forget to check out the website on a regular basis. I've been updating stuff like crazy, so there's going to be new things constantly coming on there. So just every once in a while, just don't forget to pop by and see if anything new showed up. One new thing, the new store is live. I'm so excited.
What?
The new store is live. So I switched over what company I'm using for our merch. And they are so far 10,000 times better than the company that I had before. Have you got your shirt already?
Mm-hmm.
No? When did you order your shirt?
Yesterday?
Okay, you're going to get it quick. So I ordered Tuesday. They said it was going to pop. They said the potential ship and the ship date was going to be it would be this coming Tuesday or Wednesday, and I got it today. I ordered it Tuesday and I got it on Friday. Well, I waited a month for her first sweatshirt from the other company. So we've got a brand new site. The products are better. The quality's better. The shipping times are better. Like, everything overall is just better about this. And it's linked into our website. So you can go onto the website, onto the merch tab, and it's all right there. You don't have to click and get redirected anywhere else.
And we're thinking about offering, also you can get like art printed
Yes.
for them.
There's a ton of stuff
So,
that we're
like,
going to start doing.
All of the Torah stuff on my Etsy page, I can
We're going to start putting on
put
canvases and
there,
prints
so,
and stuff.
so that folks can
So it'll be
order.
cool. Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of stuff. I'm updating this like every day with new stuff to catch up with what's available for us to be able to have. So it's pretty cool. So I just want to make you aware of that. The next announcement is the one I'm extremely excited about. My wife could probably tell you that I'm extremely excited about it because I've been talking about it for like the past 3 or 4 days. Because it's just been phenomenal.
Yes.
I started working on it today, but
You didn't start working on it today.
yesterday, day before, I don't remember. It's been
At the beginning of this week.
okay. I started working on it a while back. I've been working on it a lot.
So
today
much so
too.
that I'm like,
Hey, can you like
Yeah.
talk about something else?
So that is our first series. We're gonna start. This is gonna be a new teaching series. What my plan is to do. It's gonna be on Sunday afternoons. We're gonna do it like 6 weeks at a time. We're gonna do it like 6 weeks at a time. So what we'll probably do is we'll do like a teaching series for 6 weeks, and then we'll take 4 to 6 weeks off, and then we'll come back and do another teaching series. So this one is called The Life of Yeshua, the Parables. So what we're going to do in this series is we're going to dive into the parables of Yeshua. We're going to rip them apart and what they mean, how that applies to our lives, and we're going to tie it all into Torah. It's going to be phenomenal. I started working on the first one, and yeah. We're going to talk about it. So,
give her an
so a parable is a simple analogy to explain something that's difficult. But what we're going to learn is that Yeshua actually did the opposite. He took simple things and kind of hid them in parables, so that only the people that were understanding of what he was there for really knew what he was talking about. And so there's actually, depending on who you look at and who's talking, will tell you there's anywhere from 40 to 50 parables in the New Testament that Yeshua has said. So one example that I talk about a lot is the parable of the man in the field. It's the story that I use as an analogy for our life, but he says the kingdom of heaven is like a man who found a field, and then he found treasure in the field, so he sold everything he owned and went and bought the field. So it's an earthly analogy to explain a spiritual principle. Does that make sense? And so we're gonna. Oh, no! Stop it! Go back to my pretty slide.
That was pretty.
and he was like, "Look, babe," and I was like, "I like that."
I was.
He's like, don't you think it's so cool? And I'm like, yep.
Go away. There you go. Come on. So we're gonna start. I already have 3 series lined up. We're gonna start. I've got the Life of Yeshua series. We have the Life of Yeshua, the parables. We're gonna do Life of Yeshua, the prophecies, all the prophecies that point to Yeshua, And then we're going to do the life of Yeshua, the miracles, where we're going to study all his miracles that happen, and who they happen to, and when they happen, and all that. So I'm slightly excited about this series. So that's going to be Sunday, February the 6th, 6 to 8 p.m., 6-week series. If you go online, there's a link on the very main page. Scroll down, and it shows this picture, and you can click on the picture, and it'll take you to the events page and give you more details, and then we'll talk about it as we get closer to it. All right, so this week we're going to be on Torah portion Vayeshev, which means he's settled. Then he settled. Something like that. Then he settled. So a recap of last week, and as always, we're going through this verse by verse, and I'm going to be breaking stuff down. And he settled, thank you. I'm going verse by verse, breaking this down, but at any point, if you have something to comment or something to say, please say it, and then we'll always have questions at the end of each chapter as we go along. So recap from last week. Jacob finds out his brother's coming to meet him. He sends out messengers ahead of him with gifts, hoping Esau will accept him. He reminds Yah of his promises. Jacob wrestles with another and gets a name change. He meets his brother, and then they part ways. On their journey, Dinah gets attacked. Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, trick them and then kill all the men of the town. Jacob is displeased with their actions. Rachel dies giving birth to Benjamin. Reuben sleeps with Rachel's servant Bilhah. And then Isaac dies upon their return. So that's kind of what we did last week, kind of telling you what the story is leading up to what we're going to talk to today. So let's get right into it. Genesis 37. We're going to jump right in. I'll turn this sideways so I can see it better. All right. Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings, in the land of Canaan. Excuse me. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers when he was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. So this word bad report, he says he brought a bad report, in Hebrew is dibah, and it means evil report or slanderous report. So he's saying something bad about them. But sometimes this can be a true. So we think of an evil report. Maybe that's when we think of slander, we think of somebody saying something to defame your name. But in this case, this word dibah, it also can have the connotation of it was bad, but it could be true. It wasn't necessarily something that wasn't true. But this is interesting too. Whom did he tattle on? Who did he tattle on?
The father?
If you can't see, I'll get out of the way. Who did he tattle on?
His brothers, right?
Yeah, but which of his brothers? It's very specific. Who was he with? The slave girls' boys. So they would not have been necessarily the favorite. So we have to remember Joseph was the son of Rachel. He was the favorite. So he is with the slave girls' sons, who are definitely not the favorites. So we're kind of setting up the scenario that's taking place here. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a robe of many colors. So let's talk about this robe of many colors, because I've always, growing up in the church, it's the robe of many colors. It's the robe of many colors. You see the flannel graphs with all the pictures of the stripes and all that. It's all about the colors. It's not all about the colors. So this robe that he had in Hebrew is ketanet pasim. And the word ketanet pasim indicates that it is a robe that went to the wrists and to the ankles. So the specifics of it are telling you that it's going to the wrist and to the ankles, not that it's multicolored. Now, it probably was multicolored, but that's not what makes it important. Because this denotes that it's a royal robe. So not everyone had robes that went to their wrists and to their ankles. So the fact that he was given one that went to the wrist and to the ankles denote that it was a royal robe. So it's signifying that his father definitely thinks he's the favorite. Because he's got not only just a nicer robe that's many colors, but it is a royal robe. So it definitely is showing what Jacob thinks of Joseph.
Lydia's translation says a long sleeve.
Yes. Some of them, which translation is that?
TLV.
Yes, TLV says long sleeve tunic. I think the Berean Bible puts it that way. A lot of the more modern translations talk about it being multicolored.
That's fascinating.
But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. Hold on a second, I gotta change this real quick. There you go. And could not speak peacefully to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. Now, real quick, this could not speak peacefully to him. This is, it would be better translated as could not speak peace to him. Most of the more modern translations use the word peacefully to him, but it actually should say could not speak peace to him. And if we think about that, let's think about the culture that we're in, the area that we're in, this Middle Eastern type culture, this very honor and shame culture. They have, most of their greetings are some form of the word peace.
Right, they use like shalom to say hello.
So
right?
Jews say shalom, like that's just greeting. Instead of saying hey, they say shalom. And the Arabs say salam. That's their word for peace. And to speak peace to someone, so for me to walk up to Darren and say salam, for you not to reciprocate salam back, was almost like an act of war. Like it was considered an act of hostility. So for them to not speak peace to him, so if he walked by and said, "What's up, guys?" and they just kept walking,
Right.
that was an act of hostility. That was more than just they didn't like him.
Like it was like a dishonor.
Yes. So we haven't even gotten to Jacob's dreams yet, and we're already seeing that his brothers hate him. So let's continue on. So Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." Whew.
Well then.
His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Or are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and his words. This word hate in Hebrew is the word sino, and it literally means to turn against or to become an enemy of. So this is more than just dislike. This is not just disapproval. This is utter hatred. Like, you are now my enemy. I would rather see you dead. But what's interesting within that is that we see Yah's divine providence at work. As we get through the story, we're going to look back and go, God was in this the entire time. So there wasn't just, it wasn't that they hated him because they wanted to hate him. God was working through this entire situation. So let's talk about dreams for a minute. I want to hang my hat here for just a second because I was thinking about this when I was preparing. Because we're gonna see Joseph in two dreams. So just remember this: your dreams are not for everyone to know. Just because you dream something does not. And let's take this out of just the sleepy time dreams. What are your dreams? Your aspirations? What do you aspire to? What do you want to do? They're not for everyone to know.
Reach that.
Yah gives dreams of warning, and he'll give dreams of encouragement. But not everyone can handle your dreams. And you'll find this out the hard way, or you'll remember it before you'll learn it. Not everyone can handle your dreams. I thought this came to me too. The people in your dreams are not always the problem. Okay? So ask Yah for discernment and seek counsel. So let's back up real quick. The people in your dreams are not always the problem. Think about this. Jacob had a dream, and in the dream, he was standing in the center. He represented the one sheaf, and all the other 11 sheaves. Joseph, that's what I meant. Sorry. There's too many J's. And then
Really, it would have been a lot of Y's.
yeah. So Joseph's standing in the center, and then the other 11 sheaves come and bow down to him. And they came and they said, "What are you going to rule over us? Are you going to lord over us?" So the purpose of the dream was not that they were going to serve him. The purpose of the dream was to let him know, hey, you're getting ready to get put in a position that's going to allow them to need you. So the people in your dreams aren't always the problem. So ask God for discernment and seek counsel. If you have a dream and you're like, man, this seems like it should be important. I need to find out what's going on. Find someone who understands and can help you.
You should have went to his father.
Yes, that's the best person to start with.
Move your feet or Daddy's going to step on you.
And we're going to see more about that in a little bit when we get into chapter 39 and 40. So just keep the dream thing in mind. Verse 9, let's get back into the portion. Then he dreamed another dream. He didn't learn from the first time. And told it to his brothers and said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves on the ground before you?" So now he's bringing his mom and dad into this.
So telling his dad is not the best.
Yeah. The first one, maybe he should have gone to dad. And dad would have said, "Yeah, so if you have another one of these..."
Like, if you say that to your brothers, they might not take it.
Yeah. And actually, in some other historical references, like I was reading in the book of Josephus, he sheds a little bit of a different light that Jacob didn't mind the dream, but it was the fact that he came back again and told everybody that is why he got rebuked. He didn't learn from his mistake the first time.
Well, how did his dad know that his 11 sons and him and his mother?
Because so the dream, it said the sun and the moon and 11 stars. So it's very clear that what it represented. Yep.
And then who were
11
the other two?
brothers and then 2 moon and stars, or sun and moon. Yep. So verse 11, and his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. I thought it was interesting that he rebukes him, but then it says that he kept it in mind. So he still he's like, no, but he's like, wait a second. I'm going to remember this.
Yeah.
I'm going to remember this. So this word keep, where it says he kept, it is the same word keep that refers to Adam in the garden and how we should handle the commandments. Same word. So when it says he kept it, it means he guarded it, he protected it, he thought about it, he pondered it. Just like Adam was told to keep the garden, we're told to keep the commandments. Verse 12, now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." And he said to them, "Here I am." So this word "here I am" is hineni, and it is "here I am," but it is with the understanding that action is required. It's the same principle that we see in the Shema. We'll see in the Shema come Leviticus, that the word Shema, where it says "Hear, O Israel," or "Listen." It also it's with the intention of obedience, and it is the same. It's the same word hineni that we see in Isaiah 6, where God is asking, "Who will I send?" And the prophet Isaiah says, "Here am I, send me." It's that same word hineni. So when he said, "Here I am," he was saying, "Here I am, I'll go." Just, we think about it all the time. When God asks a question, I'm here. Okay, but are you willing to go? 14. So he said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a man found him wandering in the fields, and the man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I am seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where are they pasturing the flock? And the man said, they have gone away, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. So, I thought this was interesting. If they didn't believe in his dream, why did they feel the need to kill him to stop his dream? If you hear somebody and they're blabbing off and you're like, whatever, and you don't think 2 cents about it. But if they didn't believe him, they wouldn't have thought they needed to kill him to stop his dream. So some part of that was still resonating in their mind, going, I don't really want to have to bow down to this guy. But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, let us not take his life. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father. So Reuben was like, okay, if I can just get him to throw him in this pit, I can come back later and I can rescue him, and then I can take him back to his father, and then I'll be the good son. I'll be the good guy. This is what came to my mind though when I read this. Genesis 4:8. Cain spoke to Abel his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is Abel your brother? He said, I do not know, and my brother's keeper. And the Lord said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Did Reuben know about this event? Because he said, don't shed blood. It was their brother's blood. And if you think about the fact how they were very much a oral, communicative society, like they passed everything down by stories, there's a good chance that, so this is about 1800 years later.
About 1800.
Yeah. But as much as they passed down stuff orally, that was like part of their, like as much as we sit around and watch historical movies, that's what they did. They sat around and told stories. So the
TV to sit down. And,
yeah. So the idea of this getting passed down is very, very, very possible. So this is just kind of what came to my mind.
When you looked at that graph that showed how long everyone lived, remember we were looking at that the other night? What was the difference between them and like some of the really long living ones?
So the only there's not really anybody before Noah that would have been able to physically have passed this down.
Oh, right, yeah.
Noah was about, I think
But
Noah
Shem was there for
Noah was there until Abraham, I believe it was. I have to pull up the chart. I've got the chart. I think Noah was there until Abraham, possibly Isaac. So he could have passed some of that down. Shem would have been able to pass some of that down. But then prior to them, there's still a big chunk of time. But as much as this is an oral communicative society.
So Noah would have had to have remembered everything to tell everyone because there wasn't anyone else.
Correct.
It's a lot to remember.
Good. I hope he was a good storyteller.
Right.
All right, 23. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore. And they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. So this kind of shows us it was probably a dried up well. They probably found it. They're like, oh, hey, there's a dried up well. Let's throw him down in there. There we go. Then they sat down to eat. And so, then they sat down. They were cold-hearted to be able to just basically pronounce death upon your brother. And they're like, hey, let's eat. Man, my stomach would be turning. Reuben was probably like, you know. He's like, no way. That's why he was hollering at him. And looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." Now they're worried about that. And his brothers listened to him. The Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes. He knew the consequences that he was possibly going to face as the oldest. Where did he go? That's a good question.
He
Why
wasn't
wasn't he with
comfortable enough to sit.
He was like, I can't sit down and eat.
He was like, I'm gonna go check the flock. Something.
And he returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and I, where shall I go?" So Reuben knew as the firstborn, he would be responsible. And he knew he's heard the stories of what happened to other firstborns that didn't do what they were supposed to do. Ishmael got sent away. Esau wound up, going a different path. He knows all these stories. So he's like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do now? Then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in blood. And they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's or not." And I put like they didn't know. It's just like, come on, guys. Come up with a better line than that. And he identified it and said, "It's my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces." Now I thought this was interesting. Jacob never questioned the sons to see if they might know what happened. Like if somebody brought me my son's coat, the first time, but what happened? What happened? What happened? What happened? What happened? There's 11 of you. 10 of you now. What happened? What happened? What happened?
Well, there would have been.
What happened? What happened? What happened? And so
Joseph is the 12th one.
Joseph's the 11th one.
Benjamin.
We're going to learn about Benjamin here in a little bit. But yeah, I mean, the first thing I'd be doing is question every single one of them. You know what happened? You know what happened? He just automatically kind of like assumed the worst.
What did they tear up the rope?
Yeah, they put blood on it.
They put blood on it.
But there's no tears. So,
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
I'm sure they made it look disheveled.
Yeah,
well, I mean,
they
it
have
says
to.
you recognize whether or not this is your son, so maybe they.
Maybe.
They just
Like,
tell me.
Then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. But it's interesting now that he is reaping, again, he's reaping deception for deception. He deceived. He's already been deceived once or twice. Now he's getting deceived again. So he's
Israel.
We talked about this a while back that don't worry, he's gonna get what's coming to him. 35. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning." Thus this father wept for him. And I put this, the brothers' plan backfired because his attention is still on Joseph. I can imagine that they were like, if we get rid of him, he's not going to be the favorite anymore. Somebody else, maybe Reuben, maybe you'll get that, you're the firstborn, maybe you'll get that favorite spot back. So
No, they memorialized him now.
yeah,
So he'll never go away.
no, I shall go down to Sheol, the grave. That's the grave. That's the word for the grave. He says, I will go to my grave, still mourning for my son. And he said, I'm going to never stop mourning for him until the day I die.
That's getting rid of somebody doesn't get
Yeah, exactly.
That's the meanest thing I can almost ever think of that those boys did to their
You
father.
want to
Like-
have or you? Read my
Stop.
Verse 36. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. Any questions on 37? Any questions on that part of the story?
No.
Just this was the story I mentioned the other week where Jesus threw them down into a pit that a lot of people believe it was a cistern that they threw him into.
Yeah, it was like a dried up well.
Yeah, right up well, but it it was like stone, but you went down in it like a cave underwater that had water at the bottom of it.
Yeah.
And they're real high, and it's like a 40-foot drop to the
Yeah.
bottom.
How did he not die?
God.
I just imagine the same
Yes.
way that Daniel didn't get eaten up by tigers or
Yeah.
lions, and the lions dead.
You almost got eaten up by lions?
I did. It was scary.
Guess what? I actually was reading an imagination station,
I love imagination.
and Patrick and Beth were in the lion's den with Daniel.
In the imagination station?
It
Yes.
was, I'm pretty sure, the 20th or 21. I got those for Christmas.
I love it. I love it. We should start doing imagination station for the kids. That'd be funny.
We have
Love it.
1 to
What is
we have 1 to 21 of the series.
We'll talk about it afterwards. It's really good.
Come watch it.
All right.
Langston.
Chapter 38. Moving on to chapter 38. We're going to switch gears. We'll come back to Joseph here in a little bit. But there's this interesting story that takes place in the middle of it that we need to talk about.
We're gonna call it interesting.
Throw it out.
Yes. We're going to call it interesting. All right, verse 1. Hold on, I got to get a sip of coffee real quick. And we'll jump in verse 1. All right, verse 1. It happened at that time. So, it happened at that time, meaning kind of we're breaking into the story. That Judah went down from his brothers and turned aside to a certain Adulamite whose name was Hira. This word turned aside actually in Hebrew indicates a moral deflection. So he was actually fleeing to get away. I think I have this in my notes. Yeah. When we don't want to do what is right, the easiest path is to first separate ourselves from those who will call us out about it. So that's what Judah was doing. He was morally deflecting. He was like, I'm getting away from here because I know I'm doing wrong and I don't want anybody to tell me about it. Adullam, just some interesting facts about this Adulamite. Adullam was a royal Canaanite city. It was a very well-known place. It's actually one of the cities that would eventually be defeated by Joshua. And the cave of Adullam is where David hid with his 400 men in 1 Samuel.
Oh, wow.
So the cave that he hid in, that's 1 Samuel 22 if you want to read that story. But that's the same place, so just a little history. Verse 2, there Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. He took her and went into her. And she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name Or I'm going to say She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. Yet again she bore a son, and she called his name Shelah. Judah was in Chezib when she bore him. And Judah took a wife for Er his firstborn, and named her Tamar. But Er, Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death.
That's what we get.
No, I'm going to keep... You act like you were going to say something.
No, I just was wondering if they tell us why.
No, they don't, but I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
So this word wicked in the Hebrew, it's wicked, some translated evil, is the word ra, and its basic translation is bad, evil, unpleasant. But the Hebrew relates this idea of continually evil. It's the idea of calamity and chaos, and it is the same word that is used to describe the tree in the garden. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So this is not just he was bad. He was continually evil in the sight of the Lord. Go ahead.
That's the same way they described like the Nephilim as being continually evil.
Yes.
There were no, like nothing. They never did anything good. It was always all evil.
Correct. And this is the same idea and the principle that we see later on in like Judges when they talk about that the world has just gotten so bad. Like imagine the worst person you can think of and then just keep multiplying that. That's how this person was. He was that evil. Then Judah said to Onan, go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her and raise up offspring for your brother. But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his, so whenever he went into his brother's wife, he would waste the seed on the ground so as not to give offspring to his brother. We're going to jump real quick to Deuteronomy 25 because I'm going to tie this in for you. We're going to do some understanding of what's happening here. This is what he's talking about. The duty of a brother-in-law. We see this in Deuteronomy 25. If brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead man shall not be married outside the family to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And the first son whom she bears shall succeed to the name of the dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. And if the man does not wish to take his brother's wife, then his brother's wife shall go up to the gate to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to perpetuate his brother's name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of a husband's brother to me. Then the elders of the city shall call him and speak to him. And if he persists, saying, I do not wish to take her, then his brother's wife shall go up to him in the presence of the elders and pull his sandal off his foot and spit in his face. And she shall answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who does not build up his brother's house. And the name of this house shall be called in Israel the house of him who had his sandal pulled off. Now, the sandal pulled off thing is kind of funny, but in the Middle Eastern cultures, the bottom of your foot is like a disgrace. It's a dishonor. You know, like to show somebody the bottom of your foot, that's like really bad.
Not to be political, but there was a particular president who there's a picture of him with his feet up on the desk while he's talking to someone whom in that culture it is disrespectful to have your feet up, and it created quite a stink.
So this idea of pulling the sandal off is a sign of dishonor.
Is this like commandments here?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Okay, how does that apply, side conversation, to today?
That is a good question, and we will talk about that when we get to Deuteronomy 25. Yes, we will talk about that.
Like,
You better write yourself a note.
The camera goes off.
It's Deuteronomy.
Because I'm glad, well, I have kids, I guess it won't apply.
Yes.
I'm glad he doesn't have a brother.
So,
You do?
I do have a brother.
hold on. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me back up real quick.
I
went too far.
Married.
Seriously.
I think that
It doesn't matter?
I think there's a different stipulation. When we get to Deuteronomy 25, we'll break it down more.
Because you can't look at just one.
No, this is just the actual rule part of it. So first we have to see that this shows God's desire for generations to be perpetuated. That He doesn't want anyone's name. So, for instance, when He says, where is it at? That His name may not be blotted out of Israel. And the first son whom she bears shall succeed to the name of his dead brother. So, even though he's taken her as a wife, the first son is going to be the son of the brother. Because that way his name can be persisted on and continue on. Then from that point on, any other children could be of his. But the first one goes to his brother, basically. It's like an offering to his brother. So that's what he's talking about when he gives the rule. So let's look at the logistics of this case. Was the firstborn, therefore he was in line for the birthright. So he would have gotten the birthright. If had a son, he would then be in line to that birthright. Okay? So Judah had So Judah, if he's the firstborn, Judah would then pass the birthright to Ur would then pass his birthright down to his son. Onan was the secondborn. If dies, now Onan has a line to get the birthright. If Onan provides a son for as the rule says, he no longer has that line to the birthright. Right?
So basically he's giving it up.
It was in Onan's best interest not to provide a son for
Right.
Even though the rule says that's what he's supposed to do. It's in his best interest not to, because then he has a line to the birthright.
So along this line of things that has to be done, the secondborn would never earn the birthright.
No.
So
Even
there we
if he
have
had
that.
a kid of his own, it would still just go to the...
Well, Judah.
Dead guy first.
Correct. It would still go to his lineage. The firstborn gets the right to the birthright.
So we still have a usurping problem here.
Yeah, kind of. Basically. So, but here's the thing. There's no mention of death involved in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy just laid out the rules. The only thing that's going to happen if you refuse to is you're going to get slapped in the face or spit in the face and get your sandal taken off. Right?
When you say there's no death mentioned, you mean...
Deuteronomy 25.
Yes, but obviously the husband dies.
I'm talking about in the rules for the person that's supposed to be. Correct.
Okay, there we go.
The brother-in-law rule, there was no...
You get a spanking with a sandal.
Consequences.
There's no consequences other than your honor. You were shamed. Your honor was taken away. You're shamed,
Where
right?
did they...
But there's no mention of death in Deuteronomy. So why did Yah kill him for not performing his duties? Hold on a second. I need to see something.
All the generations
Yeah.
on the ground.
So why did Yah kill him for not performing his duties? Oh, we got an answer over here.
Oh no.
Oh, okay. You said. I was like, oh, okay.
What?
All right. I want to read this in a different translation real quick so you can hear it.
Y'all kill who?
This is the God's Word translation. But Onan knew that his descendants wouldn't belong to him. So whenever he slept with his brother's widow, he wasted his seed on the ground to avoid giving his brother a descendant.
That was the wicked thing.
2 words. 1, whenever, indicating this was not a one-time occurrence. So not only did he neglect his duties, he was neglecting his duties over and over and over again.
Continually evil.
Being continually evil.
For greedy reasons.
2, it says he wasted. That word wasted means spoil, ruin, pervert, corrupt, destroy. So he had a specific purpose, and he was not only neglecting that duty, but he was using her and defiling the seed within him. Yah said this was Ra. This was evil. Because it was continually evil. It was a continuous thing that was going on. So, any questions on that before we continue on? Because I want to continue the story.
Basically, he was using her for his physical needs and then not stepping up to the
Correct.
plate with the responsibility
Correct.
of...
He was not using his seed for the purpose that it was meant for.
And it was only the first son that was going to get that. All the sons after that were technically his then.
Were his, but he wouldn't get the
Judah's
birthright.
inheritance.
He would not get the
She
birthright.
wasn't supposed to get it anyway.
But if Aaron never had a son, he would get it. He would lose his honor to get it, but he would get it.
What if he was already married?
Well, he wasn't, so
Okay.
that's all hypothetical. Hold on, sorry, my connection got lost. Okay, Genesis 38:11. Then Judah said to Tamar. There's lots of questions in this chapter. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law. Look, when I plan for these things, trust me, I think of all the questions that are gonna come up, and sometimes I'm like, I don't have time to answer all these questions. I don't have time to study out and find the answers for all these questions. So it'll be homework. It'll be homework for next week. Genesis 38:11. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house till Shelah, my son, grows up. For he feared that he would die like his brothers. So Tamar went and remained in her father's house. In the course of time, so time is passing now, the wife of Judah, Shua's daughter, died. When Judah was comforted, he went up to Timnah to his sheep shearers, he and his friend Hira, the Adulamite. And when Tamar was told your father-in-law was going up to Timnah to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil, wrapping herself up, and sat at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown up, and she had not been given to him in marriage. So she noticed that the promise, because he said, "Wait till my son is all grown up, and then he'll take over. He'll do the brother-in-law responsibility. He'll take over. He'll be your husband." But she noticed that's not happening. You told me this was going to happen, but now he's grown up, and I've obviously not gotten him, so I'm taking off my widow garments, and I'm going to go find me a man. Verse 15, when Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. He turned to her at the roadside and said, "Come, let me come into you," for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, "What will you give me that you may come into me?" He answered, "I will send you a young goat from the flock." How many of y'all would just love to have a goat? I'm just saying. Would that not just be the most romantic thing any man had ever done?
Real crunchy
If it was the
women out
fainting
there
goats,
that are
I'm
like,
like,
yes,
yeah,
give me a goat.
And she,
And it goes like you get fresh milk.
and she said, "If you give me a pledge until you send it." He said, "What pledge shall I give you?" She replied, "Your signet and your cord and your staff that is in your hand." So he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. He said, so let's look at verse 18. He said, "What pledge shall I give you? Your signet, your cord, and your staff." So there's these three things have very, very, very important significance, and we're going to see them unfold later. One, the signet. This was a ring with a special mark to show ownership. So if you were a little bit more important, you would have a signet ring that you could mark things with. A letter, different things that was like, hey, this is mine. Two, a staff. So this is the staff they used every day. Most of them would have been carved by hand by the person. While they're watching sheep, they got their knife out and they're carving, drawing, having fun with it. So this would have been very, very, very identifiable. Yes.
Widows had their own garments.
Yes. Oh, you want to back? Well, let's back up and talk about that. Yes. So typically, when a wife her husband would die, they would put on special garments that signified that they were a widow and that their husband had just passed. When they're out in public, people would know she's mourning.
So they would be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry."
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of like now, when someone passes away, they might wear black for a while.
Or like a wreath on the door is a symbol that somebody's passed a lot of times. Stuff like that. So it was to signify. So they would have had the staff that would have been very identifiable. And then the third thing was a cord. Now this word cord actually translates out into a bracelet. It would have been something that wore on their wrist. And most of the time, those were made of precious metals. So they could have been used. If you're at market and you're like, you don't have enough money with you, you take your bracelet off. You can use it as money. So what kind of came to me about this was that I believe that she took two things that would identify the person and one thing that would be her payment that they could never claim back. So the cord would have been money. The bracelets would have been money. And everybody had bracelets. There wasn't anything necessarily special about the bracelets. So that because you could sell them, you could use them as money, trade them. But the other two things were identifiable. So she was like, I'm going to make sure I can prove who this man is, and I'm going to make sure I've got money that he can't prove it is. And a little payment for me. So verse 19, then she arose and went away, and taking off her veil, she put on the garments of her widowhood. Then, when Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adulamite to take back the pledge from the woman's hands, he did not find her. And he asked the men of the place, where is the cult prostitute who was at the name at the roadside? And they said, no cult prostitute has been here. So he returned to Judah and said, I have not found her. Also the men of the place said that no cult prostitute has been here. And Judah replied, let her keep the things as her own, or we shall be laughed at. You see, I sent this young goat, and you did not find her. About 3 months later, Judah was told, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has been immoral. Moreover, she is pregnant by immorality. And Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. So he doesn't know. He has no idea what's happened.
Hypocrite much?
Yeah. How's he gonna say that?
Mm-hmm.
How about we burn him?
Yeah, exactly. As she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, by the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant. And she said, please identify whose these are, the signet and the cord and the staff. Then Judah identified them and said, she is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah. And he did not know her again. So, I want to make sure we are clear on one thing, though. So he said, she is more righteous than I. She is not righteous. He did not say she was righteous.
Right.
He said, she is more righteous than I. So what he's saying here is that as low, as unrighteous as her actions were, she was more righteous than I am. Compared to me, she's righteous. So he is, now that he got caught, owning up to the fact that he was worse off than she was, as far as the state of righteousness goes. And we have to remember that too. I'll put that in there. You know, only Yah can declare someone righteous. Yah said because of Abraham's belief, he was righteous. And, you know, so Judah was not saying that she was righteous.
Right.
It was a comparative term there. 27. When the time of her labor came, there were twins in her womb. Interesting. We got twins again. Another twin story. And when she was in labor, one put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, "This one came out first." But as he drew back his hand, behold, his brother came out first. And she said, "What a breach you have made for yourself." Therefore his name was called Perez. Afterward his brother came out with a scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah. I made this chart, and those of you sitting over there probably can't see a thing. I didn't make this chart. I found this chart, sorry. So here's Judah. Here's Perez. Which is that's the it's not the one it's not the one that actually started to come out first. It's the one that came out second but was first.
I'm not talking about my children, sorry.
Perez, right? If we follow this line down, we get all the way to King David.
Oh, cool.
And David is the lineage of Yeshua. So here we see the beginning of this lineage. So Perez was the daughter of Tamar, the son of Judah. So all of this mess that's happened, Yah is still using it to fulfill his promise of getting to David so that he can get to Yeshua.
You must really like Abraham.
Yeah. So we see, so here's Judah. We saw and Onan that died because they were evil. Shelah, the third son, that should have married Tamar, but he didn't get there. Zerah, the second born, and then Perez is the one that eventually winds up leading to David. I found all these cool charts to use for our study too. It's pretty neat. I found all these lineages and stuff. Any questions on 38?
Are you going to put those charts on the website?
I'll have to see if they're copyrighted. I may not be able to put them on the website. I might have to make them up again on my own and do it. I'll have to see if I can find some that are public domain that I can use.
Come over and take a picture of it.
Let me
Or
see.
sit down and make a new one yourself.
Yeah, see, this one's copyrighted. It says all rights reserved. So I'll have to find some that aren't so that I can put them on the website. I'm sure there's some out there anyways. Any questions on 38 before we jump back to Joseph?
Okay. Where did Tamar come from?
She was the daughter of a Canaanite.
So she just showed up?
No, when he went with his friend, the Dulamite, or whatever that word was.
Yeah, hold on, back up to
He found her there.
Hold on. Sorry. I'm trying to see.
A Dulamite.
A Dulamite.
And took her for her.
Hold on. I gotta find it. Be back up here, go. No, that's logistics.
Maybe.
It feels like
He
she sort of
took a
popped out of
wife.
nowhere.
Here you go.
He
No.
took a wife.
Yeshua was the Canaanite one. I don't know where Tamar.
Yeah, I was
Right
like, who is
there.
she and why is she special?
Judah took a wife for his firstborn and named her name was Tamar.
She said, where'd she
Oh, where'd she come from? Yeah, so most likely she was in the land. There's actually.
They're in the Canaanite area.
So
I mean,
there's actually
who was she? Where?
there's actually debate on whether or not she was a Canaanite or not.
What else would she have been? Egyptian?
Well,
or-
so Adullam was a royal city. So it was a melting pot.
Okay.
Kind of like Corinth later in the New Testament is a big melting pot. So there's a lot of different people there. So
Okay.
it's not.
I just was wondering how she popped up all of a sudden and needed to be made sure to be.
He found her. That's how she popped up.
Who was he?
Judah.
Judah. Yeah, Judah found a wife.
Sorry, I'm just clarifying because it wasn't connecting.
Yeah, no worries. Any other questions? Before we jump back to Joseph?
If she was out to go find a husband, why'd she dress up like a prostitute?
So...
Because that doesn't seem like
I think she
that's-
had a plan.
I think she did too.
Yeah, okay, so she was out to be manipulative.
Yeah, absolutely.
She was trying to be raw.
She was trying to be raw. She was trying to be evil.
She was trying to be
I do find it ironic that Egypt's sun god is called Ra.
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting here thinking that
The
too.
power of Ra.
He's evil.
Yep, but he's evil upon evil.
Alright, Genesis 39. Excuse me. Alright, now Joseph, we're back to Joseph's story, had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. And I just want to point out, if we haven't made this emphasis enough, we're going to see the word the Lord a lot in the next few verses. Every time it says the Lord, it's Yahweh. It's Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. It is God's proper name.
Even though he hasn't given to him, he hasn't technically given it to them yet.
Sure. Yes, it is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh.
I'm just asking.
He hasn't told it. Yeah, it's there.
He gives it to him and he gives it to Moses.
Um,
So I was just asking.
his master saw that the Lord. So who saw
His master.
his master? His master saw what?
That Yah was with him.
That Yahweh was with him. So we talked
How
about
does
this.
he know?
Exactly. We talked about this. It's not just these amazing, holy, righteous people that understand and perceive Yah.
Very
So Yah was with him, and that the Lord Yah caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. Psalms 1, excuse me.
Potiphar is the master, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Psalms 1,
The
2.
Egyptian officer.
This is one of my favorite scriptures, I think, of all times. But Psalms 1, verse 2. His delight is in the Torah, and it says a few other things, and then it says, and everything he does prospers. So we're seeing this principle played out already.
Okay. Is Potiphar a name or a title?
Potiphar is a name, but Potiphar is like second in command of Egypt. Like this description here doesn't really tell you. Like
So he would
he's
have
an
been
officer,
like Daniel.
the captain of the guard, an Egyptian. Like he's one of the men.
He would have been like Daniel then.
Yes.
Which plays second in
Yes.
command, right?
Yes.
Is there another Potiphar in this somewhere?
Probably. It's a lot of the names that we see aren't always the.
Like
What?
it's not the only person.
One and
that
Like in like The Chosen, what's the guy's name that was always there with
There's Praetor. He calls him Praetor.
Yeah.
Praetor is
That's
one of the
Roman.
guards. Yeah, that's a Roman thing.
No, that's not what I'm thinking. I'll talk
Yeah.
later.
That was one. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. And he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in his house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. So, I want us to really grasp what this last sentence means. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. The only thing that Potiphar had to think about was eating. Was
What
eating.
do I want to eat today?
And he was second in command, basically, in Egypt. So he basically trained Joseph to do his job so he didn't have to do anything.
Which came in handy down the line. 'cause
Yes. So we're going to see later on that comes in very handy.
Won't give it away
But-
because Sheena hasn't read it yet.
But
Spoilers.
Spoiler.
but he's setting him up for success.
I never thought about it that way. That's cool.
So think about this, Olivia. Think about you get trained to do everything at Chick-fil-A. There's nothing that Veronica can't trust you with. The only thing she has to do is come in and say, "How's everybody doing?" and go home. Like, you're set up to eventually, you could take her spot. Because you know everything. You have everything else. The only thing she has to do is come in. All right, nothing's burned down. All right, I'm going back home. That's what Joseph was like. Except for he's over in a country. I mean, he knows how to do everything. Everything. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, and after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me."
Bluesy.
Crusty, floozy. Any other?
Loose.
Loose.
I'm sick of it.
Give me a whole lot
Hey,
going on.
Now,
I'd like to point out that he doesn't say okay.
I was
Right?
going to say that.
He's my favorite Old Testament character because he's
I was
the only
telling-
one that does
I was
him.
telling that to Abby this week. I said, what's great though is that finally there's a man that doesn't go, okay.
I love Joe for
He said,
that.
oh, oh.
Should all
Prison,
like, yeah.
but
But here's the verse that it took me to. 1 Thessalonians
That's the lessons.
1 Thessalonians 5:22. Abstain from every form of evil. Withdraw and keep away from it.
Oh.
Elizabeth, get them, please. But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me, except you, because you are his wife."
Right.
Well, let's just talk about something real quick. He is not greater in this house than I am. It's Potiphar's house. And he's saying, look, he has elevated me so high that he's not even greater than me.
Wow.
And he hasn't kept anything back from me except you. And that's a line I'm not going to cross. But then he says, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? He doesn't say sin against Potiphar. He doesn't say sin against anybody except for sin against Yah. Psalms 119:11 says, I have stored up your word in my heart that I might not sin against you.
What do you mean there? Not that it would be wrong to do to Potiphar?
He doesn't say that it would be wrong.
Oh, okay.
He doesn't say that it would be wrong to do this against Potiphar. He says it's wrong to do this against God. So then we see the psalmist David saying, I stored up your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. He said every sin is a sin against God.
Right.
It's not a sin against man. It's a sin against God first. Verse 10, and as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house were there in the house, first problem,
Don't be alone with somebody.
she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. Now, what garment is this probably? It's probably
His tunic.
his. Now, it's not the same one he left, but think about what position he's in. He's in Potiphar's house, second in command in Egypt. The tunic he's wearing
Everybody knows what he's
is
wearing.
probably a long tunic to the ankles, to the wrists. It's the same kind of tunic that his dad probably made for him. That same. It's a royal tunic. So there's, being the second command, he would have had almost like, okay, in the military, if two guys are passing, one's an officer and one's not, they can identify them very quickly.
Yeah.
By their stripes, by their medals, there's very identifiable things. Same thing. He would have been very, very identifiable by his garments.
Okay.
Now, would an Egyptian garment be the same, though, as the other garment that
Probably.
Dad
No. Probably not the same. It probably wouldn't have been the same look.
Style,
Plus,
exactly.
he's in a much more place of nobility.
Right.
So even if they were the same style, the one he had there probably would have been a lot nicer.
It would have been a Gucci instead of
Yeah.
a George.
Yeah.
Can I run something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I want to just kind
First thing
of
came to mind.
dwell on for a second, then maybe you can back this up on the strength of character it was for Joseph because.
Oh, we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know.
No, yeah.
But like, Potiphar's wife wouldn't have just been some like next door kind of girl. She would have been like the
Yeah.
cover of.
He would have
Top Model
had the
magazine.
pick of the litter for his wife.
She'd have been real party.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that he said no once. It was that he said no day after day after day.
Yes.
I'm just saying props. Like props.
Yes.
Props.
Potiphar need to come home.
Well,
He must have worked out of the house.
I love how he fled out of the house too, and then we see that we're told to flee from sexual temptation.
Gotta run.
And it's not just to like turn from it or anything; it's flee.
Yes.
Because that's a hard one.
If
And
she
he
had,
was like, whoop.
and if she had his tunic, then she literally was trying to take off his attire.
Yes, she laid hands on him. Says she caught him by his garments. She was like, "Come to me." Yes. And as soon as she saw that he left his garments in her hand and fled out of the house, she called to the men of the household and said to them, "See, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried out, he left his garments beside me and fled and got out of the house. Then she laid up his garments by her until his master came home. And she told him the same story, saying, The Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came into me to laugh at me. But as soon as I lifted my voice and cried, he left his garments and fled out of the house. As soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, This is the way your servant treated me, his anger was kindled. And Joseph's master looked at him and took him and put him into prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. Matthew 5:10-12. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. James 1:2-4. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Galatians 6:9. So let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we don't give up. These are all scriptures that tie into this story of Joseph. 1 Corinthians 6:18. Flee. This is what Erica was talking about earlier. Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin that a man commits is outside the body, but the one committing sexual immorality sins against his own body.
Wow.
The only way to deal with this sin is to flee. And Joseph knew it. So, this question came to my mind. Could Joseph have avoided this? Could he have avoided this?
There was other people in the house who couldn't.
Yes?
Maybe he told his master what was happening.
Yeah?
I don't see that going well.
Could he have avoided this? Would he have fulfilled Yah's purpose for his life had he avoided it? So we're gonna see in the next chapter, we're gonna see in Genesis 40 how this plays out. So keep that question in the back of your mind. Could he have fulfilled? And part of this is going to roll over into next week because we're not going to find the answer to this question really until next week. But just keep that in mind. Could he have avoided this? And had he avoided it, would he have still fulfilled his purpose?
I don't know, Rose.
So keep that in the back of your mind. 1 Peter 3:14. But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled.
Yeah.
So continuing on, verse 21. But Adonai, so he's gotten locked up. He's got thrown in. Oh, hold on. I forgot one thing. Let me back up.
What did you forget?
Hold on. There was one thing I wanted to point out that I thought was interesting. When I was listening to a teaching on this, they pointed this out, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. As soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, this is the way your servant treated me, his anger was kindled. His anger was kindled toward whom? It does not specifically, a lot of times in Scripture, it'll say, and Yah's anger was kindled towards Jacob, or his anger was kindled towards such and such. So now we see his anger was kindled. It doesn't define who it was kindled towards. And the one thing that I was listening to, they're talking about is, as a servant, yet even though he was high up, he was still a servant. And as a servant, to dishonor the Potiphar's wife would have been an immediate death sentence.
Right.
And he didn't kill him. He just threw him into prison. So, just
I kind of
did he know how his wife was? And maybe there was, or not. And I'm just throwing it out there because there's some evidence that points towards maybe he knew how his wife was, and so because of that,
angry.
He knew he had to deal with he knew he had to deal with Joseph because of his status. He couldn't just let it go. But he was like, I'm not going to kill the guy because I know how my wife is. So there's that. There's also writings that point towards he didn't. That he was oblivious to it. So I'm just
seems like he's almost angry at the situation because he had to do something.
Yeah.
Not that he wanted to, but.
Well, and it seems very poignant that she's like that Hebrew servant. Like, she's a little racist.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was very, very common in
Well,
that
I
day
know, but I'm
for
saying
them to
still
be
it was like...
to turn their nose up at other
She didn't
nationalities.
seem to have a problem sleeping with him until he wouldn't, and then she was like, I'm
Yes.
going to insult your heritage.
Correct. So just throwing it out there. That not saying there's an answer to that. Just interesting
No,
to
I was
think
just
that
thinking
it doesn't point out specifically who his anger was kindled towards. Verse 21, but Adonai was with Joseph and extended kindness to him and gave him favor in the eyes of the commander of the prison. So now he is been thrown in prison, and
now he's already elevated up to that.
and he's already getting favor in the eyes of the prison guard. So again, let's go back to Psalms 1 where it says, it talks about that he who is in the Torah, everything he does will be blessed. Well, it also goes back, if you read the middle part of that, I didn't put the whole verse up there. If you read the middle part, it says, he is like a tree planted by waters that bears fruit in its season, and everything he does is blessed. So it doesn't matter where he's at, he's finding favor. He's blessed wherever he goes. The commander of the prison entrusted into Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison, so that everything that was done there, he was responsible for it. So let's go to the next verse. So the commander of the prison did not concern himself with anything because Adonai was with him, and Adonai made whatever he did successful. So it's the same thing. He's achieving the same status that he had with Potiphar. He's got the same status now with his prison guard. Any questions on 39? Before we continue the story into chapter 40 and see what happens to Joseph in prison.
I can't stand girls like her.
Yeah.
I think you and my wife are the same. You're in the same place.
We watched a movie the other day that I was like, do not grow up and be a woman like that. I looked at the girls.
So any questions on chapter 39? Before we move on? Let's move on to chapter 40, last chapter. We're going to start to wrap this story up, and then we'll conclude it next week. We're gonna leave you with a cliffhanger before you go tonight. Mm-hmm. Now, it was after these things. So what are these things? The events that just happened. So he's in prison now. That the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master as well. Who knows what they did? So Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, with the chief of the cupbearers and with the chief of the bakers. So he put them in custody of the house of the commander of the bodyguards in the prison, the place where Joseph was confined. The commander of the bodyguards assigned Joseph to be with them and serve them as their personal servant. I think that's interesting that he gets to a place in prison, then he gets elevated to basically second command in the prison, and now he's serving these other two that just got in the prison. So he's their personal servant. Everything they need, he attends to. Exactly. That's it. Well, they're high up officials that got thrown in jail. They're probably.
What did you do as a baker that pissed Pharaoh off that bad? Did you burn the bread? Like how did
There's
that?
no-
It's kind of like the prison where, like,
right?
Martha Stewart went.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so the other thing too, it doesn't tell us their nationality. So very well, because of the way they're being treated, these are most likely Egyptians
Right.
that have gotten put into prison. They're getting treated better They're in a little bit nicer facility. They're in a better place. They're getting a servant. They're definitely not Hebrew like Joseph was, getting treated the bottom of the barrel. The commander of the bodyguards assigned Joseph to be with them and serve as their personal servant. They were in custody for some time. Then the two of them each dreamed a dream on the same night. The dream of each man, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison. Each had its own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he observed them, and they were looking miserable. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were with him in the custody of the house of his master, saying, "Why are your faces so sad today?" They said to him, "We dreamed a dream, and there is no one to interpret it." Then Joseph said to them, "Don't interpretations belong to God? Please, tell me." So again, what we talked about earlier, the dreams. Seek counsel. If you got a dream and you don't understand it, you want some clarity, seek counsel. Find somebody that can say, interpretations to God, just tell me the dream, I'll go ask them.
Kind of makes you wonder if after his little whoop growing up and telling dreams without seeking interpretation, he was like, let me give you some advice.
He's like, I know about dreams. Let me tell you how I got here.
Let's make sure we're interpreting these
yes.
correctly.
So the chief of the cupbearers told his dream to Joseph, saying to him, "In my dream, suddenly there was a vine in front of me. On the vine were 3 branches, and as it was budding, the blossoms came out, its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, pressed them into a Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in Pharaoh's palm." This is the interpretation, Joseph said to him. The 3 branches are 3 days.
Wow.
In another 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position. This, the term here, lift up your head, is in this case is a sign of honor. He's like, I'm lifting up your head. To restore you to a position, then you'll put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to before, when you were his cupbearer. But if you remember me, that I was with you when it goes well with you, please show me kindness and mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this house. For I was forcibly kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing at all that they should put me in this pit. When the chief of the bakers saw the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, I also was in my dream. Expectantly, there were 3 baskets of white bread on my head. Now, this guy's like, oh, this guy had this great thing going. Let me tell you my dream now. In the top of the basket was food for Pharaoh, all kinds of baked goods, but the birds were eating them from the basket on my head. Then Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. In another 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head off of you and will hang you on a tree. Then the birds will eat your flesh off of you.
Not too good for him.
Yeah. So he didn't get this. He was like, whoa, no, never mind.
Can I take that back?
Never mind. I'd have the dream.
Let's switch dreams real quick.
Then it happened on the 3rd day, Pharaoh's birthday, that he held a banquet for all his servants. He lifted up the head of the chief of the cupbearers and the head of the chief of the bakers among his servants. He restored the chief of the cupbearers as his cupbearer, and he put the cup on the palm of Pharaoh's hand. But the chief of the bakers he hung. It was just as Joseph had interpreted for them. Yet the chief of the cupbearers did not remember Joseph. Indeed, he forgot him.
Sad.
And it actually winds up being another 2 years that Joseph has to stay in prison before anything ever happens. We're going to see that next week too. So he was 17 when he sold into slavery, right?
How is he now?
He was 30. We're going to see next week when he becomes ruler over Egypt. So he waited 13. We can't even wait a couple years, a couple minutes, a couple of hours for Yah to act. He waited 13 years for Yah to act. From the time that he got enslaved and sold to the place where Yah comes in and rescues him and restores him where he's supposed to be. It took him, think about this, at 17 he had a vision, he had a dream, and in both of his dreams he was standing tall and others were bowing to him. It took him 13 years to see that dream fulfilled.
Did it say in scripture he was 17, or is that just what
Yes.
historians have figured out?
It says he was 17.
Oh, I missed it, my bad.
Any questions on chapter 40?
Is it a pit or is it a house? Does it some point it says house, and then another time he called it a pit. Is it a pit because he's bad at it and he doesn't want to be there? Is it like an analogy?
Probably, yeah. It's a prison. So in that day, prisons would have been all kinds of different things. They could have been built into caves. There could have been sometimes they would have had like a cave. If there was a cave, they could build in front of it, and that would be the jailer's house. And then the pit in the cave would have wound up being the actual thing. If there was something, you got to think about in this day and age. If there was a physical land feature they could use instead of having to completely build something, they were going to do it. Just like if you think about Petra, the stone city that's built into the rocks. I mean, they used the physical land features there to build out of. It makes it easier to utilize something that's already there. Any other questions? Chapter 40? Before we get into the application of this week? We're doing good. It's at 8:30. That's awesome. Alright, so let's talk about application. How do we apply this? And I don't know about y'all, but since I started doing this every week, I find it enjoyable. It gives meaning to what we're doing, what we're studying. So application. 1, from what we've learned tonight, learn to keep your dreams. Guard them. Protect them. Pay attention to them. Seek counsel, but don't share it with the world. The world doesn't need to know your dreams.
They don't need to know your good news either.
I know, right?
Ask me how I know.
So, second thing, second life
I'll
application.
tell you in a minute.
Never underestimate Yah's divine intervention. So we just looked at all these things that Joseph went through, but they're leading up to the promise of Yah. But we can look back and now we can see that all of it was divine intervention. It was God acting the entire way, along the way. He caused his brothers to hate him. Things happened. So if his brothers would have never hated him, they'd never thrown him in a pit. If they never thrown him in the pit, he never got sold into slavery. If he never got sold into slavery, he'd never wound up in Potiphar's house. If he didn't wind up in Potiphar's house, he'd never got thrown in prison. If he didn't get thrown into prison, he'd never been able to interpret their dreams, and we're going to find out why that's important next week.
I want to know now.
So, what is he doing? What is Yah doing that you can't see?
Right.
Always remember that. When we go through hard times, when we go through situations, what is Yah doing that we can't see? All right. The next thing, are we blessing those around us? Are we being a blessing to those around us because of who we serve? We serve Yah. As we learn to walk this out, like Psalm says, everything we do will be blessed. And it talks about the Potiphar's house was blessed because of Joseph. Yah blessed it because of Joseph. Then we see in the prison guard's house was blessed because of Joseph. So other things should be getting blessed if we're following Yah. Right? So like Olivia, is Chick-fil-A getting blessed because you're working there? Is the town of Leland being blessed because you're working there? Are these things happening because you're there? Sorry. Is it getting blessed because you? So if it's not getting blessed because Olivia's there, then you got to step up.
Chick-fil-A's double blessed.
He's double blessed. About to be triple blessed. Before long, we're just going to have our Torah meetings at Chick-fil-A on Sundays.
Please stop.
On Sundays.
Okay,
Yeah, have a key.
There you go. Get everybody there.
So Matthew 5:16 says, "In the same way, let your light shine before men, so that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." So are people seeing your good works, and because of that, glorifying Yah? And this was interesting too. This came to my mind too. We're talking about the story of Joseph. All the things he went to. How many times have we said, "Oh, I just can't catch a break"? So first, make sure that what is happening, the happenings that are going on, are not a consequence of your action. We talked about this last week. Make sure that what's happening is not a consequence of something you've done. And if that's the case, then learn to wait on Yah. When we have these moments, we're like, "Oh, I just can't catch a break." Well, are you doing something wrong? Is your life not in order? If your life is in order, then there's a good chance that there's divine intervention taking place. And Yah is aligning the pieces to make sure that you're going down the path to get you to the eventual place you need to be. And you're blessing people along the way. All right, any other questions? That is Torah portion Vayeshev. Next week, we're going to continue the story of Joseph, see how the story unfolds, and we only have 3 weeks left in Genesis. 3 weeks left, and we'll be done.
It's January
28th.
is when we start.
We start Exodus. So
Your
we got.
favorite.
That is my favorite. Exodus is my favorite. I said that earlier today.
Living room. They're
Exodus,
all your favorite.
Exodus is my favorite book until we get to Leviticus.
Do
So
you actually have a favorite?
yes, it's Exodus.
Yeah, but then
Until
you
you
say
get to Leviticus.
My favorite book between Genesis and Leviticus is Exodus. It is. I do. I do have a favorite book. It's called the Bible. Like the entire thing. Like it's just amazing. I've spent